This is the supposed country of Bandia. It's interesting to consider what it would have been like if it had become a reality during the interwar period. How would this have affected World War II? Would Germany have received M for free? Would the Soviet Union attack the country because of Karelia? Would Germany launch an assault on Scandinavia as part of Operation Weserubung? I will answer all these questions in this video, as well as show how the world would have developed after World War II. If you have never heard of the concept of Bandia, it is the union of the Baltic and Nordic countries. In the interwar period, these were Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. Of course, such a development of events is unlikely, as according to the real plans for the creation of Baltoscandia in 1928, all members must be similar in size, geographical location, religion, and must be able to respect and tolerate each other. All these countries were relatively close geographically, and some of them got along quite well, while others did not. Norway was only 23 years ago a part of Sweden, so their union is unlikely. Finland gained independence only 10 years ago, so they are unlikely to give it up. The same can be said about all the Baltic states. This means that any union must begin with an alliance between Denmark and Sweden that would precede it. Moreover, the proposed members of Bandia differed by religion, as most were Protestants, while Lithuania and small parts of Latvia were Catholic. They also differed in size. Sweden was about 10 times larger than Lithuania, which is a significant difference. Thus, the formation of the Confederation of Bandia seems extremely unlikely, even more than you might think. But if we abandon realism, we can come up with a truly fascinating scenario. So let's do that. Let's start with the obvious. This country could become an equivalent of Poland for the Nordics, as both Germany and the Soviet Union would later want to divide its territories. If Bandia were to become a country in the interwar period, its territory would be discussed in the context of a division similar to that which occurred with Poland. How could this country have arisen? I previously mentioned that Denmark and Sweden would need to work together to attract other countries into an alliance. The best way to do this is during World War I, when all Scandinavian countries officially remained neutral. In this alternative history, I propose that Baltoscandia was initially formed as a Nordic union, as the Baltic states and Finland were still under the rule of the Russian Empire. Primarily, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark feared being attacked from both sides, so they decided to create an armed neutrality alliance. If one member was attacked, the others would intervene, which was meant to deter Germany or Britain from invading Scandinavia. Historically, such an invasion did not occur, and Scandinavia was not attacked by either side. But at that time, it was uncertain, as Belgium and Luxembourg were also neutral. Yet they were attacked on the Western Front. In this alternative scenario, the story unfolds with both sides of the conflict considering an invasion of Switzerland to gain an advantage and break the prolonged stalemate. 3 Scandinavian countries decide to unite in a league of armed neutrality, potentially merging their armed forces for more effective response to external threats. However, since all these countries are monarchies, complete unification seems impossible. It is much easier for republics to unite. Nevertheless, they can create a political entity that will preserve the sovereignty of each country and will aim to improve the situation of all members. The motto will be, "In unity, there is strength." This political structure will resemble the modern format of cooperation between the Nordic and Baltic countries, known as the Nordic-Baltic Eight. Within this union, each country will vote for the Minister of Defense, Ministers of Economy, Secretaries of State, and so on. The plan is that if a talented economist emerges in Norway, the other members will benefit from his achievements, while the Swedes and Danes will assist Norway in other aspects. Essentially, this political entity will resemble the European Union, striving to improve the lives of all its members while respecting their sovereignty. Thus, the Scandinavian countries will not be subjected to invasion, and the political structure they created will continue to function in the interwar period, demonstrating its effectiveness. One significant change after the Great War will be Denmark's return of Schleswig-Holstein. Historically, Denmark did not want a strong German minority in the country, as it could destabilize the kingdom and open the way for German aggression. These fears were quite justified, but in this alternative scenario, Denmark would be close to Sweden and Norway, which are obligated by treaty to defend Denmark. Therefore, it can be assumed that the Danes would be less cautious about reclaiming territories with a predominantly German population. Schleswig-Holstein can become practically independent while formally remaining under the Danish crown for legitimacy. The residents of this region will not be burdened by military operations, and when Germany faces a serious economic crisis in the 1920s, the number of those wishing to rejoin Germany will be extremely small. The Scandinavian countries will also demonstrate high efficiency, leading to an improvement in the quality of life in Schleswig-Holstein. Despite the fact that this scenario should not be taken too seriously, it illustrates how Scandinavian countries can work together for common goals: economic growth and armed neutrality, possibly even creating joint armed forces. We must also consider the Baltic states, which may turn out to be quite simple, as in 19 they experienced hard times. Practically at war with the Soviet Union, Lithuania managed to achieve independence thanks to German volunteers and the presence of the British and French fleets in the Baltic Sea. Lithuania was particularly interesting, as at one point it became communist and proclaimed itself Litbol, but the Lithuanian communists were defeated. Poland tried to establish control over Lithuania, wanting to appoint pro-people ministers who would vote for the unification of Lithuania with Poland. Lithuania also faced problems with Germany, as it was awarded territory it did not particularly want. At one point, Lithuania tried to exchange this territory for another, but their proposal was not accepted. The Lithuanians also actively supported the creation of a union to have protection in case of a Polish or Soviet invasion. The threat of an attack from the Soviet Union was felt in Estonia, as both countries could find themselves isolated from their allies in the war against the Soviet Union, which would certainly lead to their defeat. This prompted them to want to join the Union to prevent invasions. Finland would likely join this union, as it had warm relations with Sweden. The Swedes helped Finland in the Civil War of 1918, but also tried to forcibly capture the Åland Islands. In this alternative history, I would suggest that Sweden not attempt to seize these islands to avoid ruining relations with Finland. Instead, Sweden would simply help the young nation overcome difficulties, and Finland would become the last member of the Union. In this video, the Union is not a formal country, but rather resembles both the European Union and NATO simultaneously, as they cooperate in the economy and have mutual defense obligations. All participating countries would maintain their independence, currency, and policy, but would choose joint ministers in a common government rather than just in their own. The Union ministers would strive to improve the entire association so that an Estonian could help Denmark and vice versa. Smaller countries could benefit from the support of larger and more experienced states. Upon gaining independence, the Baltic countries faced chaos, as they had never been independent in their current form. When they gained independence, they did not know how to properly govern their states. In this alternative history, Scandinavian countries would help the Baltic states by allowing Scandinavian ministers to temporarily govern the Baltic regions until they could elect a stable government. Historically, the Scandinavian countries were among the strongest supporters of the independence of the Baltic states in the 1990s, and were the first to open their borders to them, introducing visa-free regimes. The relationships between all participating states would be excellent, contributing to prosperity. The situation would be especially bright for Schleswig-Holstein, which would not be part of the crumbling Germany in the 1920s, when Germany faced many problems. Problems with the occupation of their territory, hyperinflation, and humiliation after the Great War, followed by the Great Depression, struck the Vienna Republic like a bomb. Schleswig-Holstein, on the contrary, almost avoided all those hardships and even managed to thrive under the Bandia system. Therefore, the residents of Schleswig-Holstein are unlikely to radicalize and start supporting German ultranationalists, unless I am missing something important. I believe that Bandia will generally be beneficial for all the involved countries, so the Union can better withstand the Great Depression and thrive while other economies crumble. As I already said, Bandia is not a fully unified country, but essentially they have a common economy and military forces. For simplicity, I will consider Bandia as one state. The population of Bandia in 1930 will be exactly 22,700,000 people, which roughly corresponds to the population of the Spanish mainland. The fact is that if Bandia continues to integrate into a single country, they will become stronger than Spain in 1930. A more accurate comparison is with Poland, as both countries have similar populations and military sizes. I still expect that the internationalists in Germany will come to power and peacefully begin to revise the Treaty of Versailles, which was their original goal. Bandia will definitely have conflicts of interest with the nationalists in Germany, but will this lead to a formal invasion? Bandia will have a bad relationship with Germany and the Soviet Union, while with Poland, they will have a complicated love-hate relationship. On one side, Poland has the same enemies as Bandia, Germany and the Soviet Union, but between Lithuania and Poland, there are conflicts of interest, making collaboration between Poland and Bandia unlikely. In my opinion, the main supporter of Bandia will be the United Kingdom, which wants Bandia to remain strong and control the K-channel, preventing a strong naval presence from Germany and the Soviet Union in the Baltic Sea. Germany can still obtain sand through a referendum, after which they may militarize Rand again, causing concern among some members of Bandia. These fears will be justified as Germany may annex Austria, further heightening the anxiety of the Bandia countries regarding a potential German attack. The collaboration of these countries will bring many benefits. Historically, after Norway and Denmark were captured by Germany, Sweden began to build fortifications on the Norwegian border, violating the dissolution agreement of the union between Norway and Sweden in 1905. These resources could have been used differently, and now the countries of Bandia will invest in defense in Melle and Holstein, as well as build defensive fortifications against the Soviet Union, but not close to Leningrad. This is because Leningrad is quite close to Finland and Estonia, and Bandia's hope in the event of a war with the Soviet Union is to quickly capture Leningrad. The Soviet Union intends to demand peace, and essentially, the tactic against Baltinia will be that the best defense is an attack. After all, Baltinia is a vast country, but it has very few border provinces with Germany, so strengthening these territories would be the ideal option for defense. When Germany captures Czechoslovakia, all of the Baltic Scandinavian countries will understand that war is ahead, and they need to mobilize and accelerate the fortification buildup. As a result, Baltoscandia will be able to mobilize about 2 million soldiers in case of war with Germany, which is more than enough to hold the front. This time, Germany will not be able to pressure Lithuania into ceding territory, as it did in history, because the Lithuanians will now build fortifications. Moreover, they will have the support of all of Baltoscandia, ready to assist its members. Baltoscandia will likely support Lithuania for a rather interesting reason. Some less loyal members may feel that their slogans are becoming ridiculous with the onset of the German invasion of the rest of Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia had already surrendered its fortified positions in the Sudetenland, and therefore Germany easily seized the remaining part of the country without much resistance. If Lithuania also starts building fortifications, Baltoscandia will realize that if they concede this territory to Lithuania, the rest of Lithuania could be captured without resistance, as happened with Czechoslovakia. This is why I expect Baltinia to withstand and not succumb to German pressure, as both countries are roughly equal in strength. Baltinia may have fewer soldiers and a less modern army, but it will focus solely on defense, which will level the odds in case of war. Allies or Poland may help Baltinia, and then Germany will surely face defeat, as Baltinia understands it cannot make concessions and survive. Germany and the Soviet Union will likely meet secretly and express their hatred for Poland and Baltoscandia, later dividing both countries into spheres of influence. The fact is that both Germany and the Soviet Union agree that they must first deal with Poland, not the Baltic Scandinavia. The reason is that if they eliminate Poland first, they will have a common border that could be beneficial for both countries. Historically, the Soviet Union briefly supplied Germany with military materials during World War II, and even the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was adjusted to meet Germany's oil needs. Thus, in 1939, ironically, Germany and the Soviet Union acted as allies, not only jointly dividing Poland, but also briefly supporting each other's military objectives. Thus, I expect that World War II will begin almost exactly as in real history, and that the Soviet Union will also participate in the division of Poland. Considering that Poland has already been dealt with, Germany will focus on the West. But there is one key issue: Sweden. Steel export is an important matter, especially considering that Sweden provided Germany with key resources, aiding its war efforts. Without this, Germany could not hope for victory in the war against France and Britain. In this alternative history, Sweden is part of the BALTO-SCANDIA, which adheres to a strictly anti-German policy. In fact, Swedish steel exports could be supplied to the Allies, strengthening their military action.